everyone. My name is Ana Sofia Pelais. I'm with Miami Freedom Project. I'm very happy to welcome our guest, Maxx Fenning from PRISM, Florida. If you're not familiar with the organization, we are about changing the conversation around what it means to be progressive in Miami. So we're very excited to have someone who is doing that work every day. Welcome, Maxx. You're here for our first show.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm pioneering it.
Wonderful. So I'd love to, we've done a lot of work together. And I think when you're in these movement spaces, you just have these issues that you're following, and then you just touch upon other groups where there's alignment. But I would love to hear from you what brought you to Florida? What brought you to PRISM, Florida?
Yeah, so we actually started as a high school club. I was the vice president and then co-president of my high school GSA, and it had become a very, very hostile space to a lot of queer students. And so we really felt that we needed a clean slate, a fresh start. And so we started PRISM really with the intention of doing that. Got a lot of pushback from school admin. They didn't like the idea of having more than one LGBT club. And so after a year of fighting, our leadership were about to graduate, and we decided, let's just start a nonprofit and sort of expand beyond one school and out into the community. And here we are 4 years later.
So it's been in the last 4 years. So 4 years ago, you were a high school student. Mm-hmm. So I've seen you do a lot of work with high school students. So you were them up mm-hmm. until very recently. Mm-hmm. So can you tell me a little bit about what made you choose yourself? What made you think that you were the person who was going to step into the space and stay in this space as after you graduated?
I think a lot of it was that it wasn't being done. Right. I think that there was not enough support for queer students. I also think, in particular, we do a lot of work on social media, and that's something that was not happening and was a very, very dire need, especially in the wake of the pandemic. And I think if not me, then who is sort of the situation that we were faced with.
What has been your experience in these last 4 years of organizing around this issue in particular? I think for many of us, we've become aware of LGBTQI plus issues in the schools in a kind of crisis mode. We're hearing about rights that are being taken away. That I think for me, speaking personally, I think for maybe some people who are listening, we thought it was going in the right direction. We thought, progress was too slow or too fast for some people, but it was going in one direction. Then we've seen a kind of turnaround. So what has your experience been like organizing specifically on this issue in Florida?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize just like how quickly these things have happened. I say this a lot, but I hail from Palm Beach County Public School District, which is like one of the most progressive school districts in the country and has been for quite some time, especially in terms of like LGBT rights and support for queer students. And when we started as a nonprofit in 2020, that was very much still the case. I remember I'd spoken with a staff member talking about all the LGBT initiatives that they had, and they had, LGBT inclusive books in every single school library. They had all these non-discrimination protections and LGBT inclusive sex ed. They were working on like dedicated course codes at the high school level for like LGBT specific like history, like whole history classes. And imagining that now is crazy, right? Just 3 or 4 years later, the situation that we're facing in Florida is completely different, right? And it's been really, really hard to see that, coming out of high school, witnessing how quickly that experience for students in the K through 12 sphere has changed from what I experienced, which was a very, very inclusive environment for queer students. And so I think that a lot of it has been sort of trying to claw our way back to a state in a school environment where students feel safe or have at least some semblance of safety, some semblance of representation, and then obviously that they're actually learning about the world around them. But I think this year we're really starting to see things come back around and really starting to get a little bit more hope.
When you're working in this issue and you're seeing this kind of backslide, how do you think people change over? Do you think it was something people were uncomfortable with how open it was becoming, the conversations that were being had? Or do you think something was introduced that made it okay to not be comfortable, that made it okay to speak against or to organize against LGBTQ youth, it is also worth remembering that a lot of times these are organizations that are coming from up from within the student population. So sometimes what I'm surprised at when I'm in some spaces with you is that they're speaking about children. They're speaking about maybe not young children, but they're speaking about young people. And it's coming from adults. And I feel like it's such a disproportionate, it can feel so hurtful to come from people who you should be looking up to, that they're in some way working against young people. So what is your feeling of that? Do you feel like it became permissible, it became okay to not be comfortable with some of these new ideas or kind of new ways of talking about these issues that people were already having?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is conservatives are really good at messaging. Like, just being honest, I think that I often liken the Don't Say Gay and Trans law, for instance, to no promo homo laws, which were implemented in like peak AIDS epidemic, like 80s and 90s, and they basically stated that teachers couldn't promote a homosexual lifestyle in schools. And these things that all started getting repealed over the past decade and a half by state legislatures that are still conservative, right? That even those conservative legislatures are realizing like these things are just kind of outdated. And so we saw that law in particular as like, having that understanding of LGBT history is like, okay, that's obviously equally like archaic and outdated, and we need, and there's no way that this is going to pass, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no way that anyone's going to get behind it. But the reality is, it's been masked in this, in this pretty like shell of parents' rights and the parental right movement. I think that's something that we really started taking a new, really started taking a new shape with the mask mandates and the sort of birth of Moms for Liberty in 2020. Before mask mandates became less of a hot button issue, and they needed to find something else to pivot to, and it was queer people. And so the timing lined up just right for them to be able to push through this messaging that makes something like what is essentially a no promo homo law, and what is generally been seen as really, really just hurtful and bigoted, as much more palatable.
I think it's interesting that you bring up messaging, because part of the work that we do is focusing on Latino communities. And when you think about Don't Say Gay, it is a very strong message. Don't say gay. The first thing you say, why can't you say gay? Like that. The idea is that it immediately prompts a question. And I think one of the things that we've seen that's really challenging in organizing around these issues in South Florida is it doesn't translate easily into Spanish, and the translation into Spanish language is mostly around parental rights. And I think that's also a subject that people could understandably say, of course I want my parental rights. I think especially if you're coming out of an autocratic regime, if you're here for a reason, we have majority foreign-born people in South Florida, they're more likely to have experienced some kind of totalitarian or dictatorship or kind of state-fail situation. The idea that you're going to be able to protect your children with everything within your capacities is there. And I think that could be weaponized, that the idea that parental rights could be seen as infringing upon the rights of other students around teachers' ability to be able to teach and to define the curriculum and what happens in our school library. It's taking something that should be positive and turning it in a way that can be seen as negative or infringing on other people's rights. And that's a very hard conversation to have in Spanish, which is, have you had any experience in your own organizing where there's an issue or it can become more difficult to communicate with South Florida community, which is going to be speaking in Spanish and Creole, or be more responsive to messaging that you may not have access to?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, and we're grateful to to have Spanish speaking staff that are able to when it comes to press, for instance, that are able to communicate with like the Spanish speaking press and make rallies and things like that accessible to Spanish speakers or folks who are more comfortable speaking in Spanish than English, and so in that way we've been able to do that. But that's not a reality, just institutionally, that we're really able to access, that we're able to access Spanish speakers. And you're right. There's also that very, very real like generational trauma that that comes from like leaving a dictatorship, right, and coming to this country, and oftentimes trauma can be weaponized, and I think that unfortunately in many cases it is.
Yeah, well, I appreciate so much the work, and I've seen you in spaces. You lead these really powerful sessions, and I recommend everybody go to PRISM, look at their events, look at where your training sessions are, because they're always there's an issue, there's something that you're trying to move forward, but then there's always a direction towards empathy. What the person's trying to communicate, why this issue resonates, why it could be hurtful, why this is an opportunity to diminish that hurt or to block it, protect, very much in favor of students. And one thing that always stood out for me in October when there was a law to, or there was the hope that we can have an LGBTQ month in Miami-Dade public schools, you said, you have to be very present for people, it can be very hurtful. And I thought, I'm prepared for it. I'm not going to personalize it, I'm not going to internalize it. I understand where this board is, I understand where this, where the community is. I can sit through this, but it's difficult. It's difficult to see something that for you, and I can again only speak for myself, but is so simple that there's this group of people, there's this wonderful history, you should teach it to students. You can make it available to students, not in what we think of as a keeping them safe way necessarily, even though that is important when you think about how this community's been marginalized, but in a way that you want to celebrate them. It's a positive. It's not only a reactive way that it's not that you have to do this, you should want to do this. And to see something that to me is such a positive message and have people one after the other say such harmful things, that the kind of space that you need to create within a conflict area is so valuable, and I think you've done that really well. Can you talk to me about what it is to be in a space, giving public comment, whether it be at a school board or at county or at Tallahassee, where you felt like you had to step in a meaningful way to make sure that the people who were speaking felt safe, not physically safe, even though that was a problem, but emotionally safe so that they could express themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I've given so many testimonies and so many bodies, and I still it's just gut wrenching, like every single time to have your humanity stripped from you. Well, not every time, but a lot of times, like it can be really, really, damaging to the psyche and to the self to be dehumanized and belittled like that. And I think that it's so important, especially when we do the speaker trainings, right? That we're very intentional, and we've very quickly had to become very intentional about really emphasizing, the importance of being whole in your heart and in yourself, and coming into those meetings, that we make sure that folks know that there is space, that there are people to talk to, they're physically on site, that there's a community behind them and supporting them, because it can be really, really hard, not only not only obviously to see opposition and folks say really, really hurtful, really, really damaging things, but then to just do it yourself, right? Like that, and I think that stories have power and stories have value, and when you give them, when you tell them, you're also giving that value to somebody, right? And somebody who might vote, even might receive that and then just throw it in a dumpster and completely ignore you and your story and your life and your perspective. And that can be really, really hurtful to have that happen. And so it's so important that we're able to, first of all, prepare people, right? Like let them know, like this is what the vote's looking like right now. Like this is where we're looking at people standing. These are the groups that are going to be there. These are some of the things that they're probably going to say. Here's a safety plan, but also, we are here for you, right? Like there are people here for you, and please, at no point should you feel that your peace needs to be perpetually violated, that you can take space and we can make space for that.
And you're very effective in that. And I think, to me, it's always almost like an experiment, because you're in these spaces and you have 2 comments back to back and you think the room's against us. And then you have 3 comments and you're like, the room's with us. And it's these ebbs and flows
It's this emotional whiplash.
It's this emotional whiplash. And I think you appreciate how sometimes the issues that you're trying to push back against, there's this imperative. When you feel outnumbered, when you feel that this is where my community's at, this is where my city's at, this is where my state is at, you can feel hopeless. And sometimes you can forget that it really is about enough people speaking. They're still there. You always have to have hope that those people are still there. They maybe haven't felt like they can speak up. So it's a very courageous thing that you're doing, because you are giving people, okay, we have this many students are going to know that this many people felt like they could be present in this moment. And that just gives them a sense that there's, you have to hope that they're thinking there's more people out there like this. These are just the ones that are here now, but I didn't think they were here. So now there's it's going to be always exponentially more. I would love for you to talk about, I know that you were very involved in, we just concluded our Florida State legislative session. Thank God. I would say for me, there were some issues that we were very involved in and very focused on it. It can be difficult because you do look at it as we didn't have the success that we wanted, but there could have been greater harm. And I think there was a lot of momentum that we maybe had last year that I felt that momentum less because our organizing was so strong. And you were very much a part of that. So can you talk to us a little bit about what issues you were tracking and what your experience was like in Tallahassee?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will say, I talked earlier about hope and how like this is the year that we're like seeing things turn back around, and I really do mean that. I think in so many ways we're seeing this stuff crumble, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to like court wins on so many of the bills that have passed last year, in the year prior, but also in terms of legislative session, right? We had 22 anti-LGBT bills introduced this session, and 21 of them were killed or neutralized. We had one pass. It was the Stop Woke Teacher Training Bill, mm-hmm. which bans essentially DEI training mm-hmm. for teachers in public schools. But although that's a loss, that's a lot of bills killed. And I think that's important to recognize. So many bills that just never even made it to a committee or were never heard in the Senate. And I think, acknowledging that these things are falling apart, acknowledging, that I think is really important. We did have some losses that are really, 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 really specific to us that impact us pretty greatly, namely the social media bans. Mm-hmm. There were a number of bills that restrict minors' access to social media, and passed with just absolutely staggering margins. We had it was HB3 is the one that wound up carrying through, and it passed like 109-4 or something ridiculous, mm-hmm. Which is really, really unfortunate. I think. And I think part of the issue, right, is again in terms of messaging, but also it just being a very, very I'm not going to say a new issue. It's something that folks have been mulling over for the better part of a decade or longer. But something that folks have really been debating over solutions to. It is always our opinion that young people deserve to have their voices heard, mm-hmm. that young people deserve to be able to access the 21st century's town square and public forum, and we firmly believe that banning their access to social media and banning their access to resources especially like the ones that we provide, it's just not the right way to address the harms of social media.
I think that is it's a difficult issue to track because I think, and I think this is unfortunate. I feel like we're living in very polarized times. Mm-hmm. So it can be very easy to think about it on basis of values. So you think these are your values, these are the issues that align with those values, and this is what you push for. And we could potentially say that on social media, particularly in this last legislative session, people who you could assume share your values on other issues weren't with you on this. Mm-hmm. So just to understand where do you think that breakdown was? What made this bill something that was bipartisan in maybe unfortunate ways when we think about good they're getting along. This isn't necessarily a positive always.
Yeah, so. I mean, I think to some extent it's a level of grandstanding, right? That we know that social media causes really significant harms. We know that these are like massive companies that do profit off of people and unfortunately do profit off of children, right? They profit off of our time and our attention and our energy. And so they specifically engineer these platforms to be addictive and oftentimes really harmful, especially for vulnerable people like young people. Although I think young people are stronger than we give them credit for. But I think we have to square that with our right to be able to express ourselves, our right to be able to advocate for ourselves. And so I think it's not even necessarily I don't even think it's necessarily a schism in values or a schism in what we identify as real and pervasive problems. It's maybe a prioritization issue to some extent. I think it's a solution issue, right? When we address like what are the sacrifices that we're willing to make to put a stop to certain harms, and I think that this was a poor judgment call, and in our opinion, I think there's a level of Tallahassee politics that are involved in how significant of a vote that was, right? Where we had a bipartisan co-sponsorship for the bill as well. I think was a big part of why it was so successful, is because they had a Democrat that was also co-sponsoring the bill, and I think that it lands a lot of people in really, really difficult situations where they have to assess what their priorities and values are in those moments. I think to some extent, most folks in Tallahassee know that bill is not going to stand like constitutional muster. It's going to be struck down in the courts, and I think more than anything, I don't even know that it's a practice in policy making so much as it is a practice in threatening social media companies, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think that we need to light a fire under some of these companies, but it's unfortunate that this is the route that we've gone to do that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that nuance, because it almost makes you appreciate that there is a conversation to be had, and that there needs to be a better conversation, better conclusions. I do think it's, we can anticipate some litigation.
For sure. No, absolutely.
It's one of those moments, I think we have so much in the last, in Florida in the last, since 2018, where you see this legislation, like this can't be constitutional.
Right.
And a lot of times it's not. A lot of times it does play out in the courts, but I think my concern is always, while we're putting out these fires of things that we don't want, what are the things that we should be asking for? What are the things that we can be? How can we be moving forward in ways that we're not, while we're passing something, maybe along party lines, maybe around bipartisan lines, but that can't withstand the challenges because it was an overreach in the first place, and it's kind of understood that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, of course, and it's so unfortunate that they were constantly put in a position of like being on defense, right? They were constantly having to push back against bad bills and against things that might cause harm to the community. And aren't really able to push forward and aren't able to focus on spectacular things. Like there were great bills that were introduced. They never would have seen the light of day with the makeup of our legislature, but things like the Freedom to Learn Act, for instance, which was sponsored by the very same person who sponsored the social media ban, right? Like really, really great bills that we're so busy like having to push back and do harm reduction and all of these other things that are being introduced that we're not really able to find the space and find the energy to push forward for amazing things. And there were some amazing things that did pass. There's one that expanded access to PEP, for instance, for folks who have been exposed to HIV, and there are ways that we're still finding to move forward, even amidst all of that.
Can you talk to me about the public safety? So we saw some rollbacks proposed around Parkland that were passed in light of Parkland, and I think were very effective, in a direction that we would want to go more into. But then there were challenges, and that was I believe that was something where you gave public comment or you pushed back. Can you describe that experience for me and what that?
Yeah. So the bill was HB 1223, and it would have rolled back one of those provisions from the act that passed after the Parkland shooting, by decreasing the minimum age to purchase a firearm from 21 back to 18. Which, that's a real prime demographic for school shooters. So, I think it's a very, very important safeguard to have in place. So I gave public comment. There was not a lot of people in that room, I must say. I was one of I think I was one of 7 people that spoke total, probably one of 4 that spoke against it. Normally, when you give public comment, they'll tell you, hey, you have 60 seconds, you have 30 seconds, you have however long, sometimes longer. And they never did. They didn't for any of these bills, the entire committee meeting. So I timed it, from my chair just in case to make sure it wasn't anything crazy. It was 1:45, and so I get up to the podium and I start giving this testimony, and it's fire, it's passionate. I love some poetry, and about a minute in, the chair goes, "Thank you, sir." And I just kept going. And then he just keeps saying, "Thank you, sir." He doesn't say, "Your time is up, please wrap it up in one more sentence." He just keeps saying, "Thank you, sir." And then he cuts my mic. And then I yell, "If you're killing kids, you're going to listen." At this point, security had already started coming up to me right when they were about to cut my mic. I finished the rest of my testimony with a cut mic. They heard it. I don't know if Florida Channel heard it, but they sure did. And then I had, within 20 seconds of my mic being cut, they had a security guard on either end grab me by the arm and drag me out the room.
Yeah. I mean, I do admire that you were able to stay steady in that moment, stay cool. It can be, because I do think there's so many processes if you're giving public comment, if it's anywhere, if it's at your neighborhood association, if it's at the school board, if it's at the city hall. It's intimidating. The forms you have to fill out, the questions, the little, have you practiced it? That you knew you were not over time, that you were able to have a sense of this is what's supposed to happen, and if for any reason this interrupted, I'll know why, and I'll be able to speak to that. So I really admire that you were able to remember your training and all of that, and exercise your rights. I think. To the extent that what's available to you, what's accessible to you, you made full use of it. And there's a school board meeting coming up, and I know there's an issue that you've been organizing around that I believe is very important. We're always in that civic engagement space of how can we make this accessible to everyone? So can you talk to me about HD 13 and what you're hoping will happen?
Yeah, so H13 is a item that's been introduced by the Miami-Dade County School Board. It is an entirely student-driven resolution. So we've been working with Youth Action Fund and MDCPS students who reached out to us reached out to us in Youth Action Fund because they were not really able to have their voices heard, in their education and in the school board in particular. And so we workshopped a list of demands with them that wound up becoming the school board item. So again, like entirely student driven, which is spectacular. I'm so stoked about that specifically. But what it would do is it would increase student accessibility to the school board in a number of ways, right? So it would give them more direct access to the student advisor, who's a non-voting member of the school board meant to represent student voices. It would create quarterly town hall forums specifically for students. It would create recognition programs for students who get especially engaged. And then it would also automatically distribute agendas to every student, because those things are often hard to find and hard to access even for me, and it's my job, right? So I think in so many ways it so greatly expands access for young people to be able to have a voice in their own education system as the primary stakeholders of public schools and of public education. So it's gonna be heard on Wednesday. We're super excited for a really, really strong student showing, and then so many people who are going to be coming, to speak and be there in solidarity with students as well. I think it's so important that in this moment, we're able to uplift young voices, and especially now because it's a way that will really, really impact young voices, for a really, really long time.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. It is hard to imagine why. I just think everything that we ask students to understand, this is such that they would have this ability to immediately operationalize it and access it and practice it. Doesn't make sense. It's like, if you can have a model UN or a student government, why wouldn't you give them this pathway to speak directly to the people who are speaking for them? And if you wanted to support, what are some of the thresholds to support? I know that the meeting's on Wednesday. Giving public comment would be wonderful. If you can attend a training, that's wonderful. We're offering one tonight. If you can give what are some of the other avenues where people can advocate and support this initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of ways we try to keep it, again, accessible. So obviously speaking at the school board meeting itself is really, really critical. Being able to be there, and the school board members have to look you in the eye while you say, like, please give a voice to young people and give a voice to your students. That's really, really powerful. But in addition, there are some other ways that folks can get engaged and show support. One of which is a letter writing campaign. We have a letter writing campaign through Action Network, where it's super easy. It takes like less than 60 seconds. You just put your name, your first name, last name, your phone number, and your address, and then it'll send a letter to all the school board members, urging them to vote yes on the item. That's a really, really powerful way, flooding their inboxes, showing just the sheer a number of people in Miami-Dade that are, that support this item, I think is super, super important. And then also calling your school board members. So please, if you don't know your school board member and your district, fix that. And you can find the map on the MDCPS site, and call your school board member and tell them, why this is important to you, why student voices being uplifted is important to you, and why they should vote for it. And that's another really, really impactful way that you can really put your voice and your personhood behind that support. And really show that there are real people behind this. I think is really, really critical. So all of those are so important. And then obviously share all of those things with friends and family, right? Get other people to do it as well.
I think absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that we're always constantly messaging about. We're going into presidential election year, general election. I know we're all going to get a million texts. We're all going to send out a million texts. We're all going to be phone banking and knocking on doors. And it's going to be this full activation of certainly in our city and then across the state. But I think sometimes it's hard to overlook the phone call is so important. I think you call these offices and the person who answers sounds bored, and they are, but they're bored because probably the thing that they have to do that day is sit down and speak to the constituent, put which column they're in, yes, no, for, or against, because they will be asked. These representatives, however, if you're Republican, if you're a Democrat, they are tracking these numbers. And I've never been in a situation, or I've never been in a public meeting where someone on the days doesn't say, how many people have called my office? And they have to pull that number up. And I think we get inundated with messages on social media. We're always hearing from other people. And you could think that a problem is so large that you can forget that there's this one small action that you can take that is very meaningful, that the person is there, they're answering the phone, they are taking the call. And you have to, feel like you can take that next step.
Yeah, and I think that those things are so powerful. Unfortunately, they're also in some ways those actions are being delegitimized. We did the letter writing campaign, and we're still doing the letter writing campaign. And I encourage everyone to sign letters. The reason that I also say it's important to put a voice in it, and a person behind it, if you're able to. If you can't, send a letter, at least that.
Yeah.
But why I think it's so important to put a voice and a face to it is because this item was heard in committee on Wednesday, and there were school board members who read out a list of cities that aren't in Miami of people who signed the letter. So there was maybe one person in St. Louis, Missouri, and like one person in New Mexico, and so they're like, this is all these aren't even our constituents, and so I think that's why it's even more important if you're in Miami-Dade, write a letter so that they're just getting like at a certain point the report the stats don't lie, and they're going to be like, well, never mind. Actually, I'm not going to bring that one up, and because the sheer number, I think is also so important. In addition to putting a face behind it, putting a voice behind it, and giving them a ring or showing up to the meeting.
Absolutely, I think we think about all this message, and one of the most important things you can say is, this is my zip code. This is who you represent, and this is how you have to. This is the school I go to. I'd like you to vote.
This is the school I teach at. This is the school my kids go to. Right? Like, this is my district. This is my zip code. Like, really connect it, I think, is so important.
Yeah, and I do think it's powerful. I went to Miami-Dade County public schools, and you realize that the things that are available to you aren't going to be available to someone else. And I think about that my mother was just able to, single mom, point to a school and say, there, that's where you're going to go. And that there was a quality of education and an engagement that could be managed for her, that she wasn't going to be able to be present at every meeting, but that I was going to be taken care of. And I think the idea that some students will not have that care because they will be more vulnerable than than the larger population. That already happens when you're young. I think when there's something that you can do to help make sure that all of our student communities are protected, there's no reason not to do it. You have to. So thank you so much for the work. I think we want to try something on you
Okay.
that we haven't done before. Are we good with time as far as our messages? All right. So we've really wanted to, at Miami Freedom Project, we want to hear from other people in Miami, not just about what they're anxious about or what they're pushing back against, but kind of like where Miami gets us right in the heart space. So we're going to do a little lightning round
Okay.
of questions.
Okay.
There's no right or wrong answers.
Okay.
It's
I'll
just
find a way to get them wrong.
first. So there's no right or wrong, but you will be judged. Okay, so we've talked about some things we're worried about. First question, what is Miami doing right?
Ooh. I think what Miami's doing right is that it's just such a vibrant community, right? That like you can get anything you want in Miami. You can get the beach, you can get the clubs, you can get paella, you know, whatever you desire. I think
In
is
all the quantities.
literally like you can pick anything that any other city has, like Miami has.
All right, nice. We can be a little hard on ourselves, but that's lovely to hear.
Dynamic. It's how dynamic it is.
It's dynamic. This one is going to be, you just have to pick one. What is Miami doing wrong?
Urban planning.
Okay.
Miami's 2 hours from Miami, and I think it's so hard to get around. I think that's the one big parking lot, and that needs to be addressed.
This one you can just take a second. What is your most nostalgic Miami memory? And it could be from childhood, it could be from when you were younger, it could have been 5 minutes ago. I think we all have these moments of Miami nostalgia.
Ooh, this one's hard. I mean, I think something fairly recent. I think when we flooded the public comment of the school board meeting after, like, the month after they voted against recognizing LGBT History Month, which is like such an amazing reclamation of power. And I think like the photo that we took outside of the school board meeting after, which is like the most spectacular and like fueling moment of community. I think that I'll go with that one.
Lovely. What do you miss that Miami used to have?
I think it used to be a little bit more intimate. I think in some ways, like, you know, it's just been built up so much that it can be really, really easy to like disengage with people in the world around you.
Okay. What if you left Miami, and please don't leave Miami. We need you. I mean, you can leave Miami. I want you to have your life, but stay for a minute. But if you did leave Miami, what would you miss most about Miami?
I think just my community. I think I would miss, all of the amazing people that I've met, throughout my time here. And that's kind of hard to build back.
Okay. What do you want Miami to look like in 20 years?
Ooh. Well, first of all, obviously better urban planning, less parking lots, but I want a Miami where everyone feels respected, where everyone feels heard, where everyone can be who they are and be their own authentic selves, and where all young people are respected.
Okay, lovely. This is extra credit.
Okay.
I honestly, like, I had this question and then I was like, this is a lot to throw on someone. But you seem like a good swimmer.
Okay.
If Miami was a novel, what would the plot be? See? I told you. It's an unfair question.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You're on the way from North Miami to the beach, and which is a 5-hour trek, right? And you're meeting so many amazing characters along the way, like it's the Wizard of Oz or something, and someone cuts you off in traffic, and it really upsets you, and that's like your villain origin story, I think. And you go on a rampage throughout the city, and then realize that actually it's really not that big of a deal, and maybe at some point they'll learn how to use a turn signal, and so you get over it, and then you eat croquetas.
Very nice. Thank you. I didn't see the plot twist where you were having your villain moment.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, Max is gonna
It's like the
save us
anti-hero.
all.
It's like an anti-hero kind of like moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I use the turn signal for everyone. I over signal.
I do too. Yeah, and I'm really good about using a turn signal, but that's not the case for many people. So.
Nice. So how old are you when you came to Miami? Since when you've lived in Miami? You said you were in Palm Beach, and you've been in Miami since when?
Yeah, I'm actually Broward technically,
Okay.
but a lot of people think that I am like, because I'm literally down here most of the time. Like if I'm outside of my house, I'm probably in Miami. So like, you might as well just transport my home into the county. But I've been very in like active in Miami for the better part of 3 years.
Nice. All right, I think we're good. Do you have any questions? Like, how are we doing with time? 20 minutes more? Okay. What questions do you have for me?
Ooh, we're flipping the script.
We're flipping the script.
Okay. Well, not to copycat or plagiarize, but what I'm gonna ask you the hard one, and what?
Well, do you want to ask me the questions, and
actually,
I will
you know
leave
what?
my message
Yeah.
for Miami.
Yeah, I wanna know.
Okay.
Okay, so, what is Miami doing right?
My default is always negative, so this is a good exercise. What Miami does right, I've always loved Miami. Yeah, I grew up in Miami, moved to New York. I lived there for 20 plus years, and New York never needs you. New York is New York. Everyone's passing through. It's very much set in its own idea of itself. And I feel that Miami is always in process. Miami is always asking questions. Miami is always developing. I think we think of development as in some negative ways when we think about overdevelopment. But I think Miami is a city that's always trying to figure out what's possible here. And I love that energy. And I think to some extent, I feel like we've maybe gone a little back on that in not being open to people. I do think we were a city that was very welcoming in a way, where you could just kind of be like, that's him, that's her, that's them. It was a very kind of like, I'm not judging, I'm just, everyone's very welcome, everyone has their place. And that's been, I think in a way we've lost that, but I think that core of we're still a city that's deciding what it's going to be, who it's going to be, how it's going to be, is very much what Miami does very well.
Okay. Yeah. No, 100%. What do you think Miami's doing wrong? Which is obviously the easier question.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. What Miami is doing wrong, I think, I think we're in an interesting point where we're maybe taking a little bit for granted who we are or what's interesting about us. I remember, I really love the different experiences you can have in Miami. And I think there's a way that there's maybe a direction we're moving in where that's flattened out to some extent, where you can lose a sense of where you are. Whereas before you knew you were in Little Haiti, you knew you were in Little Havana, you knew you were in Kendall. There's these areas that were very distinct from each other. And I think to some extent we've lost the thread of that these are places and these are things that we need to value. I think so many of us have come from somewhere else because of the experience we talked about earlier, because of a difficult experience that we were having. So in some sense, I feel like, we can always be in this kind of temporary state. I know my family was probably here 30 years before they realized, oh, we're not going back to Cuba. So, we're always in that kind of living in two places at once.
Like one foot out, one foot in.
One foot out, one foot in. And now we got both both feet in. And I think there's a real value in that, but that's where we also have to shore up our communities and make sure that you still have that vibrancy. That little Haiti is still little Haiti, that little Havana is still little Havana. That, Wynwood is changing a lot. That all
Yeah,
our areas
no,
are changing.
yeah,
That's
I was
where we
gonna,
are right now.
that's what I was gonna say. Like when I said like intimate, and now it's just like,
Yeah, or like, you kind of lose a sense of like, am I still in Brickell? Am I still, because it just all kinds of, it all
like
seems to be expanding.
bleeds together. Yeah,
We do a lot of work on housing, and I think we talk about gentrification.
yeah, I was gonna ask. Yeah,
And I think that's a real concern, but I think an equal concern for me is the homogenization. Maybe not equal, because you want people to
Right.
be able to have homes and be.
do you think that
that?
that gentrification really plays a role in like that homogenization? That like folks are like, we have these like really distinct communities, but folks are kind of driven out of them.
They're driven out. So if you have Overtown, but you don't have the people who made Overtown what it is,
Right? Is it still Overtown?
is it still Overtown? If you have Liberty City, you have Brownsville, but you don't have the community that made it a place that had its challenges, but also had its sense of itself and who it is, its own history, then what do you have? And I think that's something that I'm concerned about losing.
Yeah, no, I 100%. What is your most nostalgic Miami memory?
I've probably, okay, I guess I just have to go with the first one that popped into, just to be fair. I don't want to age myself, but yeah. When there was a point where in the Miami Marine Stadium, the one that's on the water in Key Biscayne, and I had to piece this story back together because I was very young when it happened, where they brought a Virgin of Charity, Virgen de la Caridad, from Cuba, and it was going to be this very important event. I was there with my parents, my grandparents. What felt like all of Miami was in the stadium, which now I know is impossible, but everyone I knew in Miami was in that stadium. And they were bringing back in, it was part of a reclaiming of her from Cuba. It was basically when the Virgin of Charity went into exile, and we were all there to receive her. And there was a point where they started a prayer to her for her to save Cuba, and it was a very thunderous voice, and everyone was speaking in unison. And I remember being very young, so it's frightening, it's intimidating, because the passion and the hurt, like they were experiencing emotions. I couldn't understand what they were, because I hadn't experienced them, I hadn't understood them in that way. I didn't have words for what I was hearing and feeling. Was very powerful, and I remember just incredible empathy for everyone, because I did feel that there was something that they desperately needed. And I remember feeling, I don't know if they're going to have it. So that's my most nostalgic Miami memory when I think of being very young. And it's always, and it's a very physical, it's like on those concrete benches and you're looking up.
Right, and it's like all of the senses, right? Like
It's
really
all the
feeling the
senses.
thunder and the boom of those voices and feeling that emotion. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and the image of her coming over the water and like in the cape.
Yeah.
And the shine to her, and there's this luminous presence that was coming.
Right.
It was very powerful.
Right. What do you miss that Miami used to have?
God, what do I miss that Miami used to have? I never want to give up on anything, so I'm always think like I can find it. What do I miss that Miami used to have? Okay, I'm gonna take a minute. I felt like there were places, we used to have places where you didn't have to make a plan to meet people. You just had to have a plan to go to the place, and you'd find your people. And that was a very different, to speak more my more recent Miami history, that was Wynwood Yard. That was Versailles. You had these almost like these little parts, these little worlds that you belong to, that you just had to show up, and you were gonna be known. And I miss that feeling in Miami. I don't know. I think maybe it could potentially exist for other people. I hope it does. But there was such a break with COVID, and with pandemic, and with everyone being so separate, that sense that it could just happen, I think is maybe there's less of that, and I miss that.
Yeah, I think it's like there's so much talk about like the death of the third space. You know what I mean? Like you have like your home, your work, and then like that other place that you go to. And we're seeing that like in so many different communities. And I think that like there needs to be like that revitalization of like that place where you can just go and just feel, you know, fueled and feel home and find community in. If you left, what would you miss about Miami?
Oh God, this is so embarrassing. I love the roosters.
Mm.
It's like I go outside and I take in a rooster chant just because I'm like, oh, I need to visit my friends. During the pandemic, we had a rooster that we had to rehome. It was, I think what happened, you know, nature kind of took its own place. It like kind of spread its wings, literally. And in front of my house, I live in front of a library, there was a rooster that we were very conscious of and we were engaging with. And because we couldn't speak to our neighbors, we didn't realize that everyone was equally invested in the same rooster. And then the city came to try and take it away. And it became this, everybody basically came out of their house with pitchforks and said, you can't take this rooster. And
It's like the turkey being pardoned for Thanksgiving.
yeah, it was this spontaneous, we were filling the streets. And I'm not a confrontational person. I don't know that I could have kept my cool at the state legislature the way that you did, but I remember at one point I said, the man who was taking the rooster away kept saying to me, "You don't mato gallo, I'm from Pinar del Rio. I didn't kill it." And I said, "I want to see the rooster." So I demanded a proof of life of the rooster from the city, and then they came back and they pulled the truck around, or the van around that had taken the rooster, and the little rooster was in a sack. And then we negotiated to have the rooster released into our custody. And we built it a temporary space in the back. And all the neighbors kept coming out and they saying, "But that rooster didn't bother anyone." And I think it was a noise complaint from further out, which we don't know that rooster. We're like, that's some other rooster.
Right.
This is our rooster.
Right.
So we rescued the rooster. And then in having the space, having the rooster in my home, I would it was the most gentle way to wake up. You'd think it would bother you, but waking up to the rooster crowing, I felt like Martha Stewart. I was like, oh, these are my roosters.
Stop.
This is like, kind of felt like you just felt like I'm this, you know, living in like, you know, this like sprawling countryside. I'm like in the middle of the city of Miami. There's no sprawling. But I just love the sound of roosters, and I seek it out. So if I can be outside. The other day I was on a customer service call, and I heard a rooster, and I said, "Excuse me, was that your rooster? Was that my rooster?" And you could tell the person was a little embarrassed because they're not supposed to. I guess maybe they don't want people to feel that they're in some kind of distant place. And he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, that's Maria." And he's like, "No. I just wanted to know which rooster that was." So yeah, I think I would miss the sound of roosters. To me, that is luxury, being able to live in a city where the roosters are co-citizens.
Does that answer your question? What do you want Miami to look like in 20 years? Where like roosters are just at an equal
footing. As far as
footing?
the eye can see.
No, truly.
What do I want Miami to look like in 20 years? You know, I want us to look like us. I feel that we're such, like you said, vibrancy, I think is the right word. We're such a diverse community. And we've kind of gone into these very small spaces. We've made ourselves smaller in a way. And I don't want that to be the case. I want us to be a community where you look out and you see people who are like you, that understand you, people who are very different, people who come from very different experiences, and they can do that in safety. I obviously would want us to be above ground. I want us to feel that we've identified as a city that's part of the problem. We talk about, and I have to do this in my organizing work, of we're at ground zero for climate. I want us to be seen as a city that has, because we're cities that maybe experience problems first, we're also cities where the solutions came out of. And that happened in us bringing in people from different communities, bringing in people, being a welcoming city again. I feel like that's something that we've lost. And taking the best of the world and people who understand through empathy and through lived experience of loss that they can build, and they feel empowered to do so, and that they choose Miami as a place where they want to do that.
I love that. where is the rooster, that one rooster now?
That rooster had a journey. So we were able to get permission to have it in our yard for a while. And then at one point there was an attack, and I think a cat went at it. And we did a GoFundMe for the rooster to be rehomed at Aguacate Sanctuary. And I think it's kind of like horse country. I think of it as town and country. It's close to where I grew up in Kendall. So the rooster got this beautiful home built for it because it has to. I know a lot about roosters now, so that'll be another show. But we had this home built for it, and it got a little girlfriend named Flaca.
Okay.
And they're starting a family.
Oh.
And then they started putting in other chickens, other hens with him. So he has his, and I think once they added more hens, then he got a little bit like, oh, he got
overwhelmed.
He got a little overwhelmed. He got a little cowed. So he's kind of like, they keep him in check, but he's part of this beautiful animal sanctuary.
Oh, I love that. What a happy story. What was his name?
We aren't very creative. We named him Gallo, which is basically a rooster in Spanish.
Yeah.
But I do think he's a very iconic. Like, I feel like he can fill the Gallo space.
Yeah.
He's a beautiful rooster.
Archetypal,
That's the other thing. Yeah. Like, now I look at roosters and I'm like, oh, that's what an iridescent tail. Like, I notice all these rooster features.
Yeah.
That before I was just like, it's a chicken. Now I'm like, oh, no, it's like, that's a handsome rooster.
Yeah, you can like tell them apart.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, the hard question is, if Miami were a novela, what would the plot be?
I would say Miami is a novela.
Well, yeah.
And we're living it. I think Miami, if it was a plot, I think it would be around, I think the best and the worst of Miami very much plays out in our politics. And I think maybe that's why. Look, I come from a writing background. You can't write Miami. You just have you
just have to live it.
You just have to live it. Like Miami, there's no parody, no version of Miami that outdoes Miami. So I just think through our politics, through the players, through these figures, I think we really see who Miami is. So I think of it as a political drama, and there's maybe some very entrenched interest, but then there's a real community and a collective sense that is always going to be in opposition to or challenging that. So I see it as a kind of like, we could have one of those plots where it's like very like drawn out court case, and then somebody makes a really beautiful speech, and then there's the slow clap moment. And then it's like a very celebratory gonga or something.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
So, yeah.
Sweet.
That's how I see
It's amazing.
there. So I think we're closing in on time. I want to make sure that you have enough space. So PRISM, if you can drive. So we have the school board meeting.
Yeah.
And you said that's Wednesday.
Yeah.
If they go to your site, do you want to be very specific about what your site is? That people can go to right now and take the next step?
Yes. So, for the school board specifically, you can go to www.prismfl.org/quick-links. And that'll give you like the main links. The easier one to remember is check us out on Instagram. That's prism.fl on Instagram. Click the link in our bio, which is the same link I just said, and that will show you where it is. It's the one that says Miami-Dade students demand to be heard.
Okay, wonderful. And then if they wanted to become more involved, because this is going to be live online. So we have the school board meeting, which is March 13th. But then just getting involved in your organization, what avenues do people have to get more deeply involved with the work that you do?
Well, first up is to sign up to volunteer with us. So you can also do that on the site. There's like a little get involved page, and it has like a thing for a volunteer form, so you can fill out a volunteer form and get engaged that way. But we're always looking for volunteers to table. We got Miami Beach Pride coming up next month, so there's always ways to get engaged.
I didn't realize Miami. So what are your Pride plans?
We've done so many prides. I think we're trying to like get out of a rhythm and into like something new with Pride, like trying to explore like new things with Pride. But as always, we are going to be tabling, which is always a joy. I love just like chatting up people, talking about the work that we're doing. We have a little trivia wheel. So everyone loves a trivia wheel. You can get
Obviously.
prizes.
Do you want to borrow my questions?
Yeah, no, for
People do
sure.
the wheel and they
For
have to
sure.
answer.
And so a little trivia wheel. And then obviously we're walking in the parade. And so we want as many people as would like to walk. You don't have to pay anything. Like all you have to do is sign up with us. So we would love for folks who want to get engaged in that way. We like chanting. We're very, very big on chanting during parades.
Who
And
leads the chant? Are you the chant leader?
oh,
Okay.
oh, of course. I'm loud, so of course.
Okay. So you're the bullhorn person. You're the one that's just like comes up
And I
with
got
the
rhythm and everything. I keep everyone on their toes.
What's your go-to chant?
That's a good, because there's so many good ones, and I'm really good at cycling. I got the. This is how many we do before people get bored, and I gotta switch to the next one and keep it fresh, you know. But one of my favorites is I actually learned from Tom Lander with State School South Florida, and it is erasers are for blackboards, and then you say not for people.
Okay. Nice. I like that. It's very visual. Okay, so we have Pride coming up, so you can. I think that's a good. Like, if you want to be a volunteer, you want to do it around Pride, because there's fun.
Now's the
already.
time.
There's-
Now's the time
The
to
fun is
have the fun.
baked in.
Yeah.
What are your plans for this year, for this election year? Like, how involved are you going to get in getting out the vote, getting people mobilized? What are some of your priorities long term?
Yeah, so we're thinking about doing some. We've never actually done like voter reg work. We're thinking about dipping our toes into it, like maybe some partnerships with some of the other voter reg, orgs in Miami. So you might see us doing that. I'm not making promises that you'll see us doing that, but I think by and large, it's making sure that folks are educated, right? So making sure that folks know about the issues that are going on in their communities, especially at the school board level, of course, and just keeping people engaged in that way, and then once again, like uplifting young voices. I think that's so important that we find ways to uplift young people in this work and in this fight, and so finding new ways to engage young people to develop the next generation of leaders. I think that's really a space that will hold through the rest of the year.
Sure. And when are you running?
I don't know. Maybe it's in the cards, but
right, that
not
wasn't a
soon.
no.
Soon.
What do you think? Do you think it's easy for people to think about running? Do you feel like there's people who just know they want to do it? I just feel like sometimes we can think about how difficult it is. But what makes you think this is something that you'd consider? Because usually it's a hard no.
Yeah, I mean,
as soon as you put the running question, people go, "That's me." I'm like, no.
I don't know. It's just the amount of people that have told me that I should run for public office. I think that kind of gets you a little hyped up about it. I also think like I'm gonna coin it right now, even though there's probably a better name for it, but it's just like the Tallahassee effect. I think that I've
Ooh.
witnessed so many people that like spend any time in the Capitol building and they're like, I want to run for public office, and they're like, I've never considered that previously, but then you like see elected officials and you're like, I could do that better than you. And I think there's something about just like seeing that, like witnessing that, and just being like, yeah, I need to be in that space. Like I need to someone needs to fix all of that.
Okay.
And
I
so
love that for you.
yeah. But I think it probably wouldn't be Tallahassee. It would probably be school board is where I would dip my toes in.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here for all of that. Very excited. So yeah, I think we're wrapping up. We're good. Do you have any? This is our first show, so thank you if you're watching. Max, thank you for going first.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, a pioneer.
Pioneer, Tallahassee Effect. Copywriting that, and yeah, we're all looking excited to vote for you.
All right. Yeah, I'll let y'all know when you can.
All right, sounds good. All right, thank you, everyone. We will be here every other Monday. So I think March 25th is our next show. I'm very excited to introduce you to people who are making real positive change in our community. So that's it. See you soon. Follow us online, Instagram at Miami Freedom Project. DM us if you want to leave a message for Miami. We'll have the prompt questions. We would love to hear from you, and we will read them on air next time. All right, that's it. It's a wrap.